In the 60s, working-class families learned to make every dollar count by preparing creative, hearty meals from modest ingredients. These dinners, often improvised with leftovers and pantry staples, became a symbol of resourcefulness and homegrown ingenuity. Today, we're taking a journey through 25 cheap dinners that fed a generation. Enjoy the memories and recipes, and don't forget to share your own in the comments. Chopped liver.
My favorite thing in the whole world, chopped chicken liver.
I will tell you this is my grandmother's recipe. I will also tell you it is probably the tastiest chopped liver you will ever have.
Chopped liver was a beloved staple in many 60s households, a rich, savory dish that transformed humble liver into a treat. In working-class kitchens, organ meats were prized for their affordability and nutrition. Families would simmer chicken livers with onions, garlic, and a touch of schmaltz until tender, then finally chop the mixture with a mortar and pestle or mash it with a fork. The resulting paste was spread over rye or toast, served as an appetizer or a side dish, and sometimes even mixed into a salad for extra flavor. Its origins can be traced to Eastern European immigrant traditions, which melded with American ingenuity in small kitchens where nothing went to waste. The recipe called for patience as the liver softened in a broth, enriched with herbs like marjoram and a squeeze of lemon to brighten the flavor. Over time, this dish became a comforting reminder of family gatherings and community potlucks. Though not as common on today's menus, chopped liver still evokes memories of frugality and celebration. Its smooth texture and robust taste remain a testament to the resourcefulness that defined the era. Monkey meat sandwiches. Despite its bizarre name, monkey meat sandwiches were a tongue-in-cheek term for a budget-friendly meal that typified 60s culinary humor and necessity. Often, the monkey meat was nothing more than a creative rebranding of inexpensive cuts of pork or beef mixed with offcuts and seasonings, mashed together into a thick spread. In many working-class households, every morsel of meat was treasured and nothing was wasted. Leftovers from Sunday roasts or inexpensive cuts were transformed into a hearty filling. The recipe involved slow cooking the meat with onions, a pinch of salt, and pepper until it fell apart, then shredding and blending it with a tangy mustard-based sauce. The mixture was served between slices of bread or toasted on crackers, offering a robust, savory flavor that was as filling as it was economical. Its origin lay partly in the creativity born of scarcity and partly in a tradition of reimagining leftovers into something new. While the name might conjure images of exotic fare, the dish was firmly grounded in the reality of making do with what was available. Today, monkey meat sandwiches remind us of an era when resourcefulness reigned supreme, and every meal was an act of culinary innovation. Polynesian chicken.
We're talking a chicken dish that's so good and so tropical in flavor that by the end of the meal, you're gonna end up getting laid. We're talking Polynesian pineapple chicken.
Polynesian chicken was a creative fusion dinner that reflected the 60s fascination with exotic flavors, even among those on a strict budget. In working-class homes, this dish was often prepared using inexpensive chicken parts, simmered with a tangy sauce that borrowed from tropical ingredients such as pineapple juice and soy sauce. The recipe called for marinating the chicken overnight in a mixture of pineapple, vinegar, and spices like ginger and garlic, which tenderized the meat and imparted a subtle sweetness. In an era when international cuisine was just beginning to appear on American menus, this dish allowed families to experience an exotic flair without expensive imports. The sauce, thickened with a bit of flour and simmered with onions and bell peppers, created a vibrant glaze that clung to every piece of chicken. Often served over rice or noodles, Polynesian chicken became a weekend treat, a dish that signified both ingenuity and a welcome break from routine meals. Its historical context is intertwined with the post-war fascination for the South Pacific and the popularity of tiki culture, which even graced local diners. Although the ingredients were humble, the dish's presentation was festive and unusual, inspiring conversation and curiosity. Today, the memory of Polynesian chicken is a reminder that creativity in the kitchen could transport families to faraway lands, if only for one delicious dinner. Hoosier Pie Supper. Hoosier Pie Supper was a hearty, down-home dinner that typified the resourcefulness of Midwestern families in the 60s. Named after Indiana's proud culinary traditions, this supper was more than just a meal. It was an event that brought families together around a bubbling, savory pie. The dish featured a thick, slow-cooked filling made from inexpensive cuts of meat, root vegetables, and a medley of herbs simmered to perfection. A sturdy, homemade crust, made from scratch with basic ingredients like flour, water, and a little fat, enveloped the rich filling, creating a comforting balance of textures and flavors. The recipe often began by browning the meat with onions and garlic in a cast-iron pot, then gradually adding diced potatoes, carrots, and sometimes even a handful of beans to stretch the dish further. As the mixture simmered, the aroma filled the home, promising a satisfying end to a long day. Hoosier Pie Supper was emblematic of a time when meals were built to be both filling and economical, with every ingredient chosen chosen for maximum sustenance. Its rustic flavor profile and robust character made it a favorite at community gatherings and church suppers. Though modern kitchens may have lost some of its charm, the memory of Hoosier pie supper still conjures images of laughter around a table and the comforting embrace of home-cooked food. Egg sauce on saltines. Egg sauce on saltines was a quick and comforting dinner that many working-class families in the 60s swore by. This dish combined the humble ingredients of eggs, butter, and a medley of spices to create a savory sauce poured generously over crisp saltine crackers. Often, leftover hard-boiled eggs were mashed with a touch of mayonnaise or milk, then mixed with sautéed onions and a hint of paprika to produce a creamy, tangy topping. The resulting egg sauce was both economical and filling, a perfect solution for busy evenings when time and money were scarce. Its origin can be traced to simple home cooking traditions that emphasized stretching ingredients to feed a family without sacrificing flavor. The recipe was passed down from mothers to daughters, each adding a secret twist, a dash of hot sauce here, a sprinkle of fresh herbs there, to personalize the dish. Served on saltines, which were cheap and readily available, the combination of crisp texture and rich, savory sauce created a satisfying meal. The dish was often enjoyed with a side of pickles or a glass of milk, rounding out a meal that could be prepared in minutes. While egg sauce on saltines might seem basic by today's culinary standards, it remains an enduring symbol of the ingenuity and resilience of working-class cooks. Its simplicity reminds us that sometimes the most unassuming dishes are the ones that nourish both body and spirit. Green Goddess dressing. Green Goddess dressing was an unexpected dinner solution that emerged in the 60s among families looking to add a burst of flavor to ordinary vegetables and salads. This vibrant, creamy dressing blended fresh herbs with simple pantry staples to create a tangy, refreshing sauce that brightened even the simplest of meals. The recipe often called for mayonnaise mixed with sour cream, then generously combined with parsley, chives, tarragon, and a squeeze of lemon juice. In many households, the dressing was used not only on salads, but also as a dip for crudités, or even drizzled over a plate of steamed vegetables. Its origins can be traced to the rise of salad culture in America during the mid-century, when innovative cooks began experimenting with fresh ingredients and bold flavors despite tight budgets. Working-class families adapted these recipes to suit their needs, often substituting expensive imported herbs with whatever was growing in their gardens. The result was a dressing that was both economical and delicious, a perfect complement to a modest dinner. With its bright green hue and fresh aroma, Green Goddess dressing became a symbol of creativity in the kitchen. Today, while it might be more commonly seen in upscale salad bars, its humble roots remind us of an era when a splash of green could transform an ordinary meal into something extraordinary. Slumgullion. Slumgullion was the ultimate everything but the kitchen sink dinner, a frugal stew that epitomized working-class ingenuity in the 60s. Born from necessity, slumgullion was a hearty mix of inexpensive cuts of meat, offal, and whatever vegetables were on hand. Families would toss in potatoes, carrots, onions, and sometimes even a handful of beans into a bubbling pot, letting the ingredients meld together into a thick, comforting stew. The meat was often simmered slowly until tender, releasing rich flavors that would bind the dish together. Seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and a few dried herbs, the dish was both nourishing and filling. Its name, with a touch of irony, reflected the resourcefulness required during tough economic times. A meal that made the most of what was available, no matter how unappetizing it might have seemed at first glance. Over time, slumgullion evolved, with each family adding their own twist, a splash of vinegar here, a dash of hot sauce there, to create a dish that was uniquely theirs. Despite its humble origins, slumgullion was celebrated at family dinners and community potlucks alike. It symbolized the resilience and creativity that defined an entire generation. Today, while the name might raise eyebrows, those who grew up with slumgullion remember it fondly as a testament to the ability to turn scarcity into sustenance. Mayo and mustard spaghetti. Mayo and mustard spaghetti emerged as a startling yet effective dinner solution during the 60s, a dish that combined two unlikely condiments with pasta to form a tangy, creamy meal. In many working-class kitchens, traditional sauces were a luxury, so inventive cooks resorted to mixing generous dollops of mayonnaise with a sharp squirt of mustard. This unexpected union provided a zesty coating for al dente spaghetti, creating a dish that was both filling and economical. The recipe was deceptively simple. Cook the spaghetti until just tender, then drain it and toss it vigorously with a blend of mayo, mustard, and a dash of pepper. Some families added a splash of vinegar and a pinch of sugar to balance the flavors, while others incorporated leftover bits of ham or grated cheese if available. Its origins lay in the necessity to make use of pantry staples. Mayo and mustard were affordable condiments that could transform a basic noodle dish into something special. The creamy tang of the sauce clung to each strand of pasta, making every bite a reminder that even the simplest ingredients could be elevated with a bit of creativity. This dish quickly became a weekday favorite in many households. If you're curious to try it out for yourself, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your version of mayo and mustard spaghetti. Garbage plate casserole. Garbage plate casserole took its name from the infamous garbage plate concept, reimagined as a one-dish dinner that combined the flavors of leftovers into a hearty casserole. In the 60s, when every scrap of food was precious, families would gather the odds and ends from the refrigerator, leftover meats, a bit of mashed potatoes, some vegetables, and layer them into a baking dish. The dish was assembled by first spreading a thin layer of a savory gravy made from pan drippings, then layering in chopped meat, mixed vegetables, and bits of pasta or rice. This medley was then topped with a crust of mashed potatoes or stale bread crumbs, which baked into a crispy, golden finish in the oven. Its origins were deeply rooted in the idea of not wasting a morsel, embodying the resourcefulness of a generation that learned to stretch every ingredient. The flavors melded together during the slow baking process, with each spoonful offering a complex, comforting taste that could revive even the weariest spirit after a long day. For many, garbage plate casserole was not just a meal, it was a creative solution to economic hardship and a symbol of home-cooked perseverance. If this dish brings back memories, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories of making something delicious out of what was once considered garbage. Stretched chili. Stretched chili was the ultimate expression of culinary resourcefulness among working-class families in the 60s. This hearty bowl of chili was created by adding extra fillers, often beans, tomatoes, or even diced potatoes, to a modest amount of meat, thereby extending the dish to feed more mouths. The process began by browning a small quantity of ground beef or pork, then simmering it slowly with onions, garlic, and a blend of chili powder and cumin. As the meat released its juices, families would add in generous amounts of beans and tomatoes, stirring in leftovers from previous meals to create an even more robust flavor. The resulting stew was thick, satisfying, and far more economical than using meat alone. Stretched chili was served piping hot over a bed of rice or with a side of cornbread, its warmth and heartiness providing comfort on chilly evenings. The dish embodied the waste not, want not philosophy of the time, where every ingredient was valued and nothing was thrown away. Its origins lay in both Mexican culinary traditions and American ingenuity, resulting in a hybrid meal that was both filling and flavorful. With every spoonful, the dish reminded diners of the importance of community and the ability to make something extraordinary out of very little. Creamed peas on toast. Creamed peas on toast was a simple yet beloved dinner option during the 60s, combining the creamy texture of peas with the satisfying crunch of toasted bread. In an era when vegetables were inexpensive and widely available, families transformed a can of peas into a rich, velvety sauce by simmering them with milk, a pat of butter, and a pinch of salt and pepper. The process was as much about technique as it was about thrift. The peas were mashed lightly, not completely pureed, to retain a pleasant texture, while the milk reduced slowly into a luscious cream. Once the peas were perfectly tender and the sauce had thickened, the mixture was spooned generously over thick slices of toasted bread. This dish was often served as a light dinner or even as a filling lunch, offering a comforting combination of warmth and nourishment. Its origins were rooted in both frugality and ingenuity, as working-class cooks learned that simple ingredients could be transformed into a meal that was both satisfying and economical. The dish was particularly popular on cold evenings, when its creamy, warming quality provided a sense of home and security. Today, creamed peas on toast remains a nostalgic reminder of a time when every meal was crafted with care and resourcefulness. Eggless pancakes. Eggless pancakes emerged as a creative solution in the 60s for families who had limited resources or dietary restrictions that precluded the use of eggs. In many households, eggs were considered a luxury, so cooks devised recipes that relied on basic pantry ingredients. The batter for these pancakes was made by mixing flour with milk, a pinch of baking powder, and a small amount of melted butter to provide richness. Instead of eggs, which typically act as a binding agent, a bit of mashed banana or even a spoonful of sugar was sometimes added to help create a fluffy texture. The mixture was stirred carefully to avoid lumps, then ladled onto a hot griddle where it sizzled immediately into small golden circles. Each pancake was cooked until bubbles formed on the surface, then flipped to achieve a perfectly browned finish. The result was a light, tender pancake that could be enjoyed with a drizzle of syrup or a dusting of powdered sugar. Eggless pancakes became a morning staple for many working-class families, symbolizing the inventive spirit that defined the era. Their simple recipe, accessible ingredients, and satisfying taste allowed even the most frugal cooks to create a meal that felt both indulgent and homey. Over time, the recipe evolved as families passed it down, each adding their own twist. Potato pancakes. Speaking of pancakes, potato pancakes were a familiar dinner favorite for many working-class families during the 60s, embodying the notion of making something delicious out of humble ingredients. At their core, these pancakes were made from grated potatoes that were mixed with a small amount of flour, salt, and pepper to create a thick, starchy batter. In many homes, leftover mashed potatoes or even bits of potato peel were incorporated into the mixture, ensuring that nothing went to waste. The grated potatoes were pressed into a hot skillet with a drizzle of oil or lard until each side turned a deep, crispy golden brown. The cooking process required careful attention. Too high a heat could burn the pancakes, while too low a temperature would leave them greasy and soft. Once cooked to perfection, these pancakes were typically served with a dollop of sour cream or applesauce, a combination that balanced the savory flavor of the potato with a hint of tang or sweetness. Their origin was deeply rooted in the agrarian traditions of America, where potatoes were not only a dietary staple, but also a symbol of perseverance during lean times. For many, the simple pleasure of biting into a crispy potato pancake evokes memories of family breakfasts and modest dinners that were filled with love and resourcefulness. The recipe's ease of preparation and minimal ingredient list made it an enduring favorite. Ciro Macchioni, named after a local character known for his imaginative cooking, Ciro Macchioni was a dish that captured the spirit of 60s working-class kitchens with its fusion of Italian influences and homegrown ingenuity. In many neighborhoods, Italian immigrants had passed down recipes that were adapted to the available ingredients of the time. Ciro Macchioni combined ground beef with diced tomatoes, garlic, and a generous handful of chopped basil, all simmered slowly in a well-worn pot over a modest stove. The dish was further enriched with a drizzle of olive oil and a sprinkle of Parmesan cheese, if available, lending it an air of rustic sophistication. The cooking method was simple yet effective. First, the meat was browned to develop a deep flavor. Then the tomatoes and herbs were added and allowed to meld together into a hearty sauce. This sauce was often spooned over boiled pasta or even spread on slices of toasted bread, making it a versatile dinner option. Ciro Macchioni's recipe was passed along through family gatherings and community celebrations, each cook adding their own personal touch. Its hearty, savory flavor provided comfort and a sense of continuity amid the economic challenges of the era. Today, the dish stands as a nostalgic nod to a time when every meal was a creative endeavor. Devils on horseback.
Today we're making devils on horseback.
Devils on horseback were an unexpected yet memorable dinner creation that emerged during the 60s, a dish that combined the flavors of salty bacon and sweet fruit to create an irresistible bite. Though originally served as an appetizer in upscale settings, working-class families embraced a simpler, scaled-down version. The dish typically involved wrapping small pieces of dried fruit, often prunes or dates, in strips of inexpensive bacon. These were then baked until the bacon turned crispy and the fruit warmed, releasing its natural sugars. The result was a delightful contrast between savory and sweet, a tiny morsel that was both satisfying and economical. Its origins lie in the ingenuity of cooks who wanted to elevate basic ingredients into something special. The recipe was straightforward. First, the fruit was pitted and sometimes softened by soaking in a bit of water, then carefully wrapped in bacon and secured with a toothpick. Baked in a moderate oven, the dish allowed the bacon to crisp up while the fruit inside became tender and fragrant. Devils on horseback quickly became a hit at potlucks and family gatherings, offering a touch of gourmet flair on a tight budget. Though the dish may sound extravagant, it was born of necessity and a desire to treat oneself to something out of the ordinary. Its popularity endures in fond memories of resourceful home cooking. Potato flour sour cream. Potato flour sour cream was an innovative dinner element born out of the frugality and resourcefulness of the 60s working-class kitchen. In many homes, traditional dairy products were expensive or in short supply, so cooks turned to potato flour, a byproduct of processing potatoes, to create a tangy, thick sauce. The recipe involved mixing potato flour with water and a splash of vinegar, then blending it with a modest amount of leftover sour cream or even buttermilk to achieve a creamy consistency. The result was a versatile condiment that could be drizzled over stewed meats, poured onto vegetables, or used as a dip for homemade crackers. Its origins lie in the adaptation of old-world techniques to new economic realities. Potato flour was both inexpensive and abundant in regions where potatoes were a staple crop. Over time, families learned to adjust the ratio of flour to dairy until the mixture reached just the right balance of tanginess and creaminess. This sauce not only added flavor, but also extra calories, crucial in an era when every meal had to be both economical and filling. Its rustic, unrefined texture and sharp flavor profile provided a counterpoint to richer, heavier dishes, making it a cherished secret among those who remembered the taste of hard times and even harder work. Chicken tetrazzini. Chicken tetrazzini was a dinner dish that blended Italian-American culinary traditions with the resourceful spirit of the 60s. In many working-class households, leftover chicken was transformed into a sumptuous pasta bake that paid homage to the classic dish while adapting it for tight budgets. The recipe started by poaching chicken until tender, then shredding it into bite-sized pieces. This meat was then combined with a creamy sauce made from a roux of butter and flour, enriched with milk and spiced with garlic, onions, and a pinch of nutmeg. The sauce was stirred with cooked spaghetti and a scattering of cheese, then transferred to a baking dish. As the dish baked, the cheese melted into a bubbly topping, and the pasta absorbed the savory flavors of the chicken and herbs. Its origin was rooted in the Italian tradition of pasta casseroles, but was given a frugal twist by substituting expensive ingredients with readily available pantry staples. Chicken tetrazzini became a comforting meal for families looking for a bit of indulgence on a shoestring budget. It symbolized the era's penchant for transforming leftovers into something celebratory. Every bite evoked memories of crowded kitchens, resourceful cooks, and the unwavering determination to make every meal special, despite hard times. Hot water cornbread. Hot water cornbread was a simple yet vital dinner companion that defined the culinary landscape of working-class families in the 60s. In an era when ovens were not always available or reliable, hot water cornbread provided a quick, economical alternative that could be prepared on a stovetop or even over an open flame. The recipe was remarkably straightforward. Coarse cornmeal was mixed with just enough boiling water to form a thick, pliable dough, then quickly kneaded until it reached the right consistency. The dough was then shaped into a flat, round cake and cooked in a hot, greased cast iron skillet until it developed a crisp, golden crust. The resulting bread was dense and slightly crumbly, with a naturally sweet corn flavor that made it the perfect side dish for stews and soups. Its origins were deeply embedded in Southern cooking traditions, passed down through generations as a way to stretch limited resources. Hot water cornbread was more than just a food. It was a symbol of innovation in the face of adversity. The simplicity of its ingredients and the ease of preparation meant that even on the busiest of days, families could enjoy a freshly made bread that felt homemade and hearty. If you're feeling nostalgic about these down-home flavors, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your memories of hot water cornbread. Baked ziti. Baked ziti became a dinner staple for working-class families in the 60s, offering a warm, comforting meal that was both filling and economical. The dish centered on ziti pasta, which was mixed with a robust tomato sauce, enriched by ground meat or sausage, whichever was available at the time, and a generous helping of cheese. In many households, the sauce was simmered slowly with garlic, onions, and dried herbs, transforming inexpensive ingredients into a deeply flavorful concoction. Once the pasta was cooked al dente, it was tossed with the sauce and layered with slices of mozzarella and a sprinkle of parmesan before being baked until bubbly and golden. Baked ziti was not only satisfying, but also versatile. Families often added vegetables like spinach or bell peppers to stretch the dish further. Its origins can be traced back to Italian immigrant kitchens, where pasta baked with leftover ingredients became a celebration of both resourcefulness and tradition. The process was a communal one, with family members gathering to assemble the dish and share in its creation. Every slice of baked ziti told a story of perseverance and the ability to transform simple, accessible ingredients into a meal that warmed both body and soul. Today, the dish is remembered as a hearty reminder of a simpler time when every dinner was made with love and ingenuity. Tamale pie. Tamale pie was a creative dinner solution that combined Mexican culinary influences with the practicality required by working-class families in the 60s. This dish was born out of necessity, using inexpensive ground meat, beans, and cornmeal to create a hearty, layered casserole that resembled the flavors of traditional tamales without the labor-intensive process. The recipe started by browning ground beef or turkey with onions and garlic, then stirring in a blend of diced tomatoes, chili powder, and cumin to build a savory, spicy base. Next, a smooth mixture of cornmeal, water, and a dash of butter was prepared to form a thick, gruel-like topping. This cornmeal mixture was poured over the meat and bean layer, then baked slowly until the top developed a golden, slightly crisp texture. The result was a dish that captured the essence of tamales, a satisfying combination of spice, texture, and warmth, but in a far simpler format. Its origins were influenced by the blending of cultural cuisines in America, where immigrant traditions met homegrown ingenuity. Tamale pie quickly became a family favorite for its ability to feed many on a tight budget while still offering a taste of something exotic. The hearty, layered flavors made it a memorable dinner choice that still sparks conversation among those who grew up with its comforting taste. Roosevelt coffee. Roosevelt coffee was not a dinner in the traditional sense, but in the 60s, it evolved into a beloved late-evening beverage that that accompanied many a modest meal. Named in honor of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's belief in a chicken in every pot, this robust coffee was made using economical, readily available beans that were dark roasted to bring out a deep, smoky flavor. Families often brewed Roosevelt coffee in large, battered percolators that had been passed down from generation to generation. The process was both ritual and necessity. As the coffee bubbled, its aroma filled the modest kitchen, offering comfort and a sense of renewal at the end of a long day. Often served with a splash of milk or a bit of sugar, Roosevelt coffee was enjoyed by everyone, from hardworking laborers to busy mothers preparing for the next day. Its historical context is intertwined with the American spirit of perseverance and the idea that even simple pleasures could boost morale in tough times. The recipe was simple yet effective. Coarse ground beans, water, and thyme, sometimes stirred with a bit of leftover cream for extra richness. Roosevelt coffee symbolized the resilience of an era when every cup was savored as both a pick-me-up and a small luxury. Its legacy lives on in the fond memories of those who recall its comforting warmth on chilly nights. Braised beef tongue. Braised beef tongue was an adventurous yet affordable dinner option that showcased the resourcefulness of working-class families in the 60s. Often considered awful by those unfamiliar with traditional cuisines, beef tongue was prized for its tender texture when cooked slowly and its ability to absorb rich flavors. The preparation began by thoroughly cleaning the tongue and then simmering it for hours in a pot filled with water, vinegar, and aromatic vegetables such as onions, carrots, and celery. As the tongue braised, the connective tissues melted away, leaving behind a melt-in-the-mouth delicacy. Once tender, the meat was removed, sliced thinly, and returned to its flavorful broth, along with a handful of spices like bay leaves, black pepper, and sometimes a dash of paprika for color. The resulting dish was served over a bed of mashed potatoes or with thick slices of rustic bread, making it both filling and economical. Braised beef tongue was deeply rooted in old-world cooking traditions that celebrated every part of the animal. In an era when nothing was wasted, this dish stood out as a testament to the ingenuity and culinary skill of home cooks who turned what many might consider unappetizing into a gourmet experience. Its rich flavor and tender texture made it a special treat, remembered fondly by those who learned to appreciate its unique character. Breaded pig's feet. Breaded pig's feet were a daring and satisfying dinner choice that captured the spirit of 60s frugality. In many working-class kitchens, no part of the animal was wasted, and pig's feet, often considered a byproduct, were transformed into a crispy, flavorful dish that appealed to adventurous eaters. The preparation began with slow cooking the pig's feet until tender, a process that rendered the fat and softened the connective tissues. Once the meat was sufficiently tender, the feet were removed from the broth and patted dry. They were then coated in a seasoned mixture of flour, salt, pepper, and a touch of paprika to enhance their natural flavor. In a hot skillet, the breaded pig's feet were fried until a crunchy, golden crust formed on the outside, while the interior remained moist and succulent. This dish was typically served with a tangy dipping sauce made from vinegar, mustard, and a hint of hot sauce, which complemented the rich, meaty taste. Its origins lie in the tradition of nose-to-tail eating, a practice that ensured every part of the animal was valued. Breaded pig's feet became a hearty reminder of the resourcefulness required in tough economic times and continued to evoke memories of simple, honest cooking. For those who appreciate offbeat recipes and historical food trends, this dish stands out as a true icon of its era. Ketchup and egg noodles.
Today, we're making tomato egg noodle soup. It is one of our go-to dinner recipes.
Ketchup and egg noodles may sound like an unlikely pairing, yet in the 60s, it was a dinner born of necessity and ingenuity. Working-class families often faced dwindling grocery budgets, and when fresh ingredients were scarce, cooks had to rely on pantry staples to create filling meals. Egg noodles, prized for their affordability and quick cooking time, served as the base of this dish. The noodles were boiled until soft and then tossed with a liberal amount of ketchup, a condiment that added both tanginess and a hint of sweetness to the meal. Over time, inventive home cooks began to experiment with additional seasonings, such as a dash of Worcestershire sauce or a sprinkle of dried herbs, elevating the simple combination into something surprisingly comforting. The dish was usually prepared in one pot, a technique that minimized cleanup while maximizing flavor. Its origins reflect the era's make do with what you have ethos, where even the most basic ingredients could be transformed into a satisfying dinner. Served hot, this humble meal reminded families that deliciousness need not be expensive. The contrasting flavors of the savory noodles and the bright, acidic ketchup created a unique taste experience that is fondly remembered by those who grew up in that time. Sweet potato scrapple.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Today I'm making a sweet potato and kale breakfast hash. Yeah.
Sweet potato scrapple was a creative twist on a classic dish, offering a filling dinner option that utilized the natural sweetness and heartiness of sweet potatoes. In the 60s, scrapple was traditionally made from pork scraps and cornmeal, but resourceful cooks adapted the recipe by incorporating mashed sweet potatoes to add flavor and stretch the protein further. The process began by slow cooking pork, fat, and spices until they formed a rich, savory base. This mixture was then combined with cornmeal and mashed sweet potatoes, which brought a subtle sweetness and a smooth texture to the blend. The resulting batter was spread into a pan and allowed to set, after which it was sliced and lightly pan-fried until the edges became crisp and golden. The dish was celebrated for its versatility. It could be served for breakfast or dinner, often accompanied by a tangy applesauce or a dollop of mustard to cut through the richness. Its origins were deeply tied to the ethos of not wasting any part of the animal and using every available resource to create a nourishing meal. Sweet potato scrapple quickly became a comforting staple in homes where every bite was a testament to creativity and thrift. Today, it stands as a nostalgic reminder of a time when simple ingredients were transformed into memorable, soul-satisfying dishes. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes. In the 60s, meatloaf and mashed potatoes were more than just dinner. They were a symbol of working-class resilience.
So in this video, I'm going to be making meatloaf and mashed potato. I'm going to show you how I do it.
Meatloaf was the perfect budget-friendly meal for large families because it stretched a small amount of ground beef into a hearty main dish. Moms would combine the meat with breadcrumbs, oats, or crushed crackers, whatever was handy, to bulk it up. Add in a chopped onion, some eggs, and a splash of milk, and you had the makings of a loaf that could feed 6 hungry people with ease. Topped with a generous layer of ketchup or tomato sauce, meatloaf baked into a flavorful, comforting dish that made the whole house smell like home. The outside got a bit crispy, while the inside stayed moist and savory. No plate was complete without a scoop of mashed potatoes. Whether made from scratch using russets peeled and boiled by hand, or quickly stirred up from an instant box, mashed potatoes were filling, simple, and cheap. A little margarine and milk made them creamy, and sometimes a sprinkle of paprika or a pat of butter was added for flair. This meal was often served with canned green beans or peas on the side, but even on its own, it was enough to satisfy after a long day's work or school. Meatloaf and mashed potatoes were a staple in countless homes during the 60s, not just because they were affordable, but because they brought everyone together around the dinner table. Tuna noodle casserole. In the 60s,
tuna noodle casserole is one of my favorite dishes from my childhood, and today I'm going to teach you how to make the best version of it.
Tuna noodle casserole was a dinnertime lifesaver. It checked all the boxes for the working class family. Affordable, easy to make, and filling enough to feed everyone at the table. This dish became a go-to solution for home cooks trying to make the most of what they had in the pantry. Canned tuna was cheap, readily available, and didn't spoil easily, making it an ideal protein source for families watching every penny. The recipe was simple: cooked egg noodles, canned tuna, a can or two of cream of mushroom soup, and a bit of milk to thin the sauce. Some families added peas, chopped onions, or shredded cheese to stretch it even further. Everything got mixed together, poured into a casserole dish, and baked until bubbling hot. A crunchy topping of crushed potato chips, cornflakes, or breadcrumbs added that final satisfying texture. It was a one-dish meal that needed no sides, though some moms might have served it with applesauce, sliced bread, or a side salad when available. The creamy, salty, slightly fishy flavor was comforting, and leftovers held up well for the next day's lunch, sometimes even better the second time around. Even picky eaters often came around to tuna casserole after a few tries. It wasn't fancy, but that wasn't the point. It was about practicality, nutrition, and keeping everyone full. In a time before DoorDash or frozen pizza was an everyday option, tuna noodle casserole filled the gap with warmth, thrift, and substance. Fried bologna sandwiches.
Well, I'm making a fried bologna sandwich. Have you ever had one of those? It's a great, classic American treat.
Few meals in the 60s were as quick, cheap, and satisfying as a fried bologna sandwich. In working-class homes where every dollar counted, this dish became a beloved staple. Bologna was one of the most affordable deli meats around, and when fried up in a skillet, it transformed into something special. The edges would curl into a crisped cup, the center would sizzle, and a rich, savory aroma would fill the kitchen in minutes. The sandwich itself was simple: slices of white bread, fried bologna, and maybe a swipe of mustard or mayonnaise. Cheese was a popular upgrade if there was any in the fridge. Some families added a slice of tomato, a fried egg, or a few pickles, but the sandwich stood strong on its own. It was warm, salty, greasy, in just the right way, and incredibly comforting. Because it required so few ingredients, it was perfect for the nights when the pantry was running low. Kids loved it. Adults appreciated the speed and ease, and cleanup was minimal, just a pan and a spatula. It could be made in under 10 minutes and cost just pennies per serving. Fried bologna sandwiches also made great use of leftover bread and were sometimes paired with a cup of tomato soup, applesauce, or a handful of potato chips. In many households, this humble meal represented ingenuity, thrift, and resilience. It didn't take much to make it, but it delivered on taste, satisfaction, and old-fashioned charm. A true icon of the working-class dinner table. Sloppy Joes.
Today, I'm going to show you how to make a more delicious, more in balance, and slightly fancier version of a Sloppy Joe.
Sloppy Joes were a messy, saucy, and utterly satisfying staple in many working-class kitchens during the 60s. For families watching their budgets, this meal checked all the boxes. It was inexpensive, easy to prepare, and could feed a crowd. At its core, a Sloppy Joe was just ground beef, simmered in a tangy tomato-based sauce and piled high onto a hamburger bun. But the simplicity was exactly what made it a household favorite. The sauce varied from kitchen to kitchen. Some used canned tomato soup, while others preferred ketchup mixed with mustard, onions, brown sugar, and a dash of vinegar or Worcestershire sauce for extra kick. A little green bell pepper or garlic might sneak in for added flavor. Once the ground beef was browned and drained, everything went into one pan. The result was a rich, slightly sweet, slightly tangy filling that clung to the bun and often oozed out the sides. Kids loved the flavor, and the fact that it felt just a little rebellious to eat something so messy. Adults appreciated that it stretched a pound of ground beef further than burgers or meatloaf could. For bigger families, the filling could be served open-faced on toasted white bread or spooned over rice or mashed potatoes. Sloppy Joes were often paired with coleslaw, potato chips, or canned corn. They were the type of meal that filled stomachs, made everyone happy, and didn't require a lot of prep. A working-class classic, through and through. Franks and Beans.
With Billionaire's Franks and Beans.
Franks and Beans was a quintessential working-class meal of the 60s, combining cheap, hearty ingredients that were accessible to nearly everyone. The dish often involved canned baked beans paired with hot dog-style Franks, a simple yet filling dinner for families with limited budgets. The origins of Franks and Beans date back to the early 1900s, during a time when processed meats like hot dogs were marketed as affordable and convenient. By the 60s, with the rise of canned foods and the growing popularity of convenience meals, this dish became a staple in many American homes. The recipe was as simple as it gets: Franks sliced into bite-sized pieces, simmered with canned beans, usually flavored with molasses or brown sugar, and served hot. Families would often add extra seasoning or a bit of mustard for some zip. It was a meal that required little prep time, yet provided the protein and carbohydrates needed to get through the work week. Spam and eggs. Spam and eggs became a symbol of wartime necessity and frugality. Introduced in 1937 by Hormel, Spam was a processed canned meat that could be stored for long periods without refrigeration. Perfect for families in the 60s who sought affordable, shelf-stable sources of protein. During the post-war years, Spam became even more popular as families sought inexpensive meal solutions. Spam and eggs was a straightforward dish where slices of Spam were fried and paired with scrambled eggs, often served alongside toast or potatoes. This meal didn't require much in terms of ingredients, making it an easy and reliable dinner. It was also highly adaptable. On some nights, the Spam could be diced and added to a breakfast-style scramble or made into a sandwich. The historical significance of Spam and eggs ties into the larger trend of utilizing convenience foods during an era of rapid urbanization, economic shifts, and the rise of processed food companies that catered to the working class. Chili con carne.
Hi guys, it's Warren here, and here is my recipe for homemade beef chili con carne.
Chili con carne, or simply chili, became a working-class favorite during the 60s due to its affordability, versatility, and filling nature. This dish is often associated with Southwestern and Tex-Mex cuisine, though it became widely adopted throughout the United States by the mid-20th century. Traditional chili consists of ground beef, chili peppers, beans, and spices, simmered together in a pot. For working-class families in the 60s, this dish was an excellent way to stretch a small amount of meat and create a hearty meal. Chili could easily be made in a large batch and served for several meals, making it both a budget-friendly and time-saving option. The recipe's significance lies in its representation of how Americans were adapting regional flavors into everyday meals, making use of canned beans, ground beef, and spices that could be bought cheaply. In many homes, chili was a comforting dinner that fed the whole family and often used pantry staples, which were ideal for those living paycheck to paycheck. Boiled cabbage and potatoes. One of the simplest meals to prepare and one that exemplified resourcefulness, boiled cabbage and potatoes, was a regular dish in many working-class households. Potatoes were cheap and filling, while cabbage was a vegetable that could be bought in bulk at a low cost. The meal itself was just what it sounds like: cabbage boiled in water with sliced potatoes, sometimes with a little salt and pepper for flavor. Some families would even toss in bits of bacon or ham ham for extra taste, though the dish was often served without meat to keep costs low. The meal's roots go back to European immigrants who brought their traditional, frugal ways of cooking to America. In the 60s, when budgets were tight for many working families, this dish provided a filling and nutritious dinner option. The historical significance of cabbage and potatoes lies in how they were staples in many immigrant communities, where food traditions centered around frugality and the ability to make a lot out of little. Macaroni and cheese.
It is also one of my all-time favorite recipes in our cookbook, a baked mac and cheese. You guys are gonna love it.
Macaroni and cheese is a comfort food classic that gained widespread popularity in the 60s. While it had been a beloved dish for centuries, it reached new heights of fame thanks to the introduction of prepackaged, boxed versions of the meal. Kraft's boxed macaroni and cheese, introduced in 1937, became a household staple by the 60s because it was cheap, easy to prepare, and lasted in the pantry for a long time. A typical homemade version would involve cooking elbow macaroni and making a creamy cheese sauce from a roux, butter, flour, and milk, mixed with shredded cheese. By the 60s, with busy working parents, boxed macaroni and cheese was often the go-to option, providing both convenience and comfort. For families looking to stretch their food budgets, adding a can of tuna or leftover ham to the dish turned it into a more substantial meal. The historical significance of macaroni and cheese in this period is tied to the rise of convenience foods and the cultural shift toward processed, ready-to-eat meals. Goulash. Goulash was a beloved comfort food of the 60s, rooted in Hungarian cuisine, but adapted to American tastes. The American version of goulash typically involved ground beef, elbow macaroni, tomatoes, and a mix of seasonings like paprika and garlic. This dish was beloved for its simplicity and versatility, as it could be easily made in one pot and was often cooked in large batches to serve multiple meals. The history of goulash in America dates back to the early 20th century, when Hungarian immigrants brought their traditional stew recipes to the United States. The dish became a staple in working-class homes because it was inexpensive, filling, and could be customized with whatever ingredients were on hand. Whether made with beef, pork, or even sausage, goulash was a meal that could feed a family for just a few dollars. Its significance lies in how it blended immigrant traditions with the need for practical, affordable meals for the American working class. Fish sticks and tater tots. Fish sticks and tater tots were the epitome of 60s convenience food, offering families an easy, affordable dinner option. Fish sticks, typically made from white fish like cod, were breaded and then frozen, ready to be baked or fried. Paired with crispy tater tots, which were small, grated potatoes formed into cylinders and deep fried, this meal became a quick go-to for working parents. Fish sticks were introduced in the 50s as part of the frozen food revolution and gained popularity in the 60s as frozen foods became more commonplace. Tater tots, invented in 1953 by the Ore-Ida Company, were also part of this trend. Fish sticks and tater tots could be served with a side of peas or slaw and were often considered a special treat for kids. The historical significance of this meal lies in the rise of processed, pre-cooked foods that helped ease the burden of meal preparation for families with busy schedules. Canned spaghetti with meatballs. In the 60s, canned spaghetti with meatballs became a popular dinner for families on a budget. Brands like Chef Boyardee made the meal affordable and convenient, offering an easy solution for working-class families looking for a quick dinner. The canned version of spaghetti was often less expensive than making the dish from scratch, and it could be heated in minutes. While the origins of spaghetti with meatballs are Italian, the Americanized version of the dish was heavily influenced by convenience food culture. In the 60s, when canned goods were a kitchen staple, meals like canned spaghetti with meatballs provided an easy and reliable way to feed a family. Though many would prefer homemade spaghetti and meatballs, the canned version was a symbol of the growing reliance on processed foods. Its significance lies in how it represents the intersection of convenience, affordability, and American culinary adaptations. Beef and rice skillet. Beef and rice skillet dinners were an efficient way to combine meat and grains into one filling meal. This dish typically involved browning ground beef, then adding cooked rice, onions, and various seasonings, such as garlic and soy sauce, before simmering everything together in one skillet. It was a popular dinner option in working-class households because it was inexpensive, could be made with inexpensive ground beef, and required very few ingredients. Beef and rice skillet dinners were often personalized by adding vegetables like peas or carrots, and it was a meal that could be cooked in under 30 minutes. The historical significance of this dish is rooted in the post-World War II era, where families were looking for practical ways to stretch their food budgets while still providing satisfying meals. Chipped beef on toast, SOS. Chipped beef on toast, often known by its less glamorous name, SOS, was a cheap and simple meal that became a staple in many working-class homes during the 60s. This dish was made by creating a creamy white sauce, typically from flour, butter, and milk, into which chipped beef, dried, salted beef was added. It was served over toast, often used as a quick dinner or late-night snack. The dish was particularly popular during the post-World War II era when chipped beef was inexpensive and widely available. Its name, SOS, reportedly came from its association with military rations, where it was often served to soldiers during the war. While its unappealing name didn't do it any favors, chipped beef on toast was an affordable, high-protein dish for families on tight budgets. The historical significance of this dish is tied to its roots in military kitchens and its role in feeding working-class families in an era of scarcity. Egg salad sandwiches. Egg salad sandwiches were another affordable, simple meal often served at lunch or dinner. Egg salad was typically made by hard-boiling eggs, chopping them up, and mixing them with mayonnaise, mustard, salt, and pepper. Sometimes, families would add relish or celery for extra flavor and texture. The mixture was then spread between slices of bread to make a sandwich. This meal was especially common in working-class households because eggs were an inexpensive source of protein, and mayonnaise was a pantry staple. Egg salad sandwiches offered an easy-to-make, filling option for families looking for something cheap and quick. The historical significance of this dish comes from its role in post-war American culture, where the sandwich became an icon of simplicity and convenience, representing a shift towards meals that could be quickly prepared with minimal ingredients. Pork and beans on toast. Pork and beans on toast was a classic dish that paired canned pork and beans with toast. This meal was cheap, filling, and quick to prepare, making it a go-to for working-class families who needed an affordable and satisfying meal. The beans, often flavored with molasses and sugar, were served hot over crispy toast. Families would sometimes add a fried egg on top or a side of coleslaw to balance the meal. Its history dates back to the early 20th century, but by the 60s, it was a go-to meal in many American homes. The dish had roots in both New England baked beans and the British tradition of beans on toast, reflecting a blending of cultural influences in American food traditions. The historical significance of this dish is tied to its frugality and its place in the broader trend of resourceful, budget-conscious meals. Creamed corn and biscuits. Creamed corn and biscuits became a staple in many working-class homes, offering comfort and satisfaction without breaking the bank. Creamed corn is made by cooking corn kernels with a creamy sauce, typically made of butter, flour, and milk, to create a smooth, rich dish. Paired with fluffy, golden biscuits, this meal was simple to prepare and filled the stomachs of busy families. Biscuits were a popular accompaniment to many meals, especially in the South, and were often made from scratch or prepared from ready-made biscuit mix. The meal became especially popular in the 60s, a time when convenience foods were on the rise, yet creamed corn could still be made from fresh or canned corn at a low cost. The historical significance of this dish lies in its representation of both Southern comfort food traditions and the increasing reliance on canned goods and convenience foods in the post-war era. Fried chicken livers. Fried chicken livers were a popular, cheap protein choice during the 60s, particularly in families who couldn't afford more expensive cuts of meat. Chicken livers were inexpensive, and when seasoned and fried, they became a crispy, savory dish that was both filling and affordable. The preparation was simple. Livers were soaked in milk or buttermilk, coated in seasoned flour, and then fried until golden brown. This dish had deep roots in Southern and soul food traditions, where offcuts like livers were often used to create flavorful meals. Fried chicken livers were often served with mashed potatoes, gravy, and a side of vegetables. Its historical significance stems from the fact that it was a way to stretch the family budget while still providing a meal rich in iron and protein. It also reflected how working-class families in the 60s would make use of every part of an animal to avoid waste. Hamburger gravy over rice or potatoes. Hamburger gravy over rice or potatoes was a filling, affordable meal that became common in working-class households during the 60s. This dish was made by browning ground beef in a skillet, then adding flour, milk, and seasoning to create a thick, savory gravy. The gravy was poured over rice or mashed potatoes, creating a meal that was easy to prepare and could feed a large family. This meal was particularly popular in areas where ground beef was inexpensive and served as a way to stretch a small amount of meat. The historical significance of hamburger gravy lies in its practicality and the fact that it symbolized the working-class American tradition of making hearty meals with minimal ingredients. Ramen noodles with egg. Ramen noodles with egg became a go-to meal for many families in the 60s, especially as instant ramen gained popularity. The dish itself was simple. Instant ramen noodles, often flavored with a basic basic seasoning packet and then an egg added to the boiling water for extra protein. Instant ramen was introduced to the US in the late 50s and quickly became a staple for students, singles, and families on tight budgets. By the 60s, it was a symbol of quick, inexpensive, and satisfying meals. The meal was often customized with other ingredients like vegetables, leftover meat, or soy sauce. Its significance lies in the rise of processed, instant foods that fit into the increasingly busy lifestyle of working families. Shepherd's pie. Shepherd's pie, a dish made of minced meat, typically lamb, topped with mashed potatoes, was a favorite among working-class families in the 60s. The American version, often using beef instead of lamb, was a hearty, inexpensive way to use leftovers. The dish typically involved cooking the meat with vegetables, such as peas and carrots, and then topping it with mashed potatoes before baking until golden brown. Shepherd's pie was particularly loved for its versatility, as it could be made with any meat on hand. It had its origins in Britain and Ireland, where it was created to use up leftover meat and vegetables, and by the 60s, it had become a comfort food staple in American homes. Its significance lies in its role as a frugal, filling meal that epitomized the working-class approach to making the most of every ingredient. Cabbage roll casserole. Cabbage roll casserole was a hearty, no-fuss alternative to traditional cabbage rolls, and it became a beloved dinner in many working-class homes during the 60s. Traditional stuffed cabbage rolls, made by wrapping seasoned ground beef in rice and boiled cabbage leaves, were time-consuming and required more effort than many busy parents could spare after a long day. The casserole version offered all the same flavors, but in a much simpler, layered form. This dish usually begins with browning ground beef and onions in a skillet, seasoned with garlic, salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of paprika. Cooked rice was then mixed in, and the meat mixture was layered with chopped or shredded cabbage in a baking dish. A can of tomato soup or stewed tomatoes was poured over the top, adding moisture and rich flavor. Covered and baked until the cabbage was tender, the result was a warm, comforting, and filling meal that could easily stretch across 2 dinners. Cabbage roll casserole was practical, affordable, and made use of 2 common staples, ground meat and cabbage. It was the kind of meal that filled bellies and brought the family together, proof that even the humblest ingredients could deliver big flavor and comfort. Hot dog hash. Hot dog hash was a popular and affordable dish in many working-class homes during the 60s. This simple, one-pan meal combined hot dogs with potatoes, onions, and a few seasonings to create a filling and budget-friendly dinner. Hot dogs, often seen as a low-cost protein option, were a staple in families with limited resources, and they were versatile enough to pair with almost anything. To make hot dog hash, families typically started by frying diced onions and chopped hot dogs in a skillet until browned. Then cubed potatoes, either raw or pre-cooked, were added to the pan, along with some salt, pepper, and occasionally a splash of ketchup or mustard for extra flavor. The dish would be cooked until the potatoes were tender and everything was well combined. This meal was especially popular because of its simplicity and the fact that it could easily be adapted to feed a large family. It was a quick and easy option for busy parents, and the ingredients were inexpensive and could be stretched across several meals. Hot dog hash wasn't just a meal. It was a symbol of practicality in a time when families needed to make the most of what they had, transforming humble ingredients into something hearty and satisfying. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches were a staple in 60s working-class homes, not just for school lunches, but often as a quick, affordable dinner when times were tight. With just 3 ingredients, white sandwich bread, peanut butter, and fruit jelly, this meal delivered protein, sugar, and carbs in a satisfying, no-fuss format that even kids could make themselves. Though peanut butter had been popular in the United States since the early 20th century, it was during the Great Depression and into the wartime years that it became a household essential due to its affordability and long shelf life. By the 60s, with mass-produced peanut butter and prepackaged jellies widely available, the PB&J was a go-to option for families looking to stretch their food budgets. Most families used smooth peanut butter, but chunky versions were also around. Grape jelly was the standard, though strawberry or even apple jelly made appearances depending on what was in the pantry. Served with a glass of milk, it was filling enough to count as a meal on a lean day. Beyond its nutritional practicality, the peanut butter and jelly sandwich became a symbol of American childhood and working-class ingenuity. Simple, satisfying, and endlessly nostalgic. Oven-baked rice pudding. Oven-baked rice pudding was a humble, heartwarming dessert that graced many working-class dinner tables throughout the 60s. Made from pantry staples like rice, milk, sugar, and eggs, this dish transformed leftover rice into something rich, creamy, and comforting. It It was a way to stretch ingredients just a bit further, ensuring nothing went to waste, an essential mindset during a time when families often lived paycheck to paycheck. This pudding likely evolved from centuries-old European recipes, especially those from the United Kingdom, where baked rice puddings were common in working-class homes. American families in the post-war era embraced the dish for its simplicity and versatility. In a typical 60s home, the recipe started by combining cooked white rice with milk, sugar, a beaten egg or two, and a touch of vanilla or nutmeg. Some families stirred in raisins or cinnamon for extra flavor. The mixture was then poured into a baking dish and slowly baked in the oven until it set and developed a golden, slightly caramelized top layer. Served warm or chilled, oven-baked rice pudding was more than dessert. It was a nostalgic reminder of frugality, resilience, and the sweetness that could be found in life's simplest pleasures. And there you have it. Have you tried any of these meals? Do you know anyone that we missed? Please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notification bell for more content like this. Until next time, bye for now.